Hi, I'm Brenda Sieglitz with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I am the Keystone 10 Million Trees Partnership Manager, and I thank you guys so much for joining me today. I'm going to be talking about our program, which is located across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and going over some of the initiatives, the strategy, how we got here, and some of the partners that are making it happen in your region. We kicked off this project in April 2018, but a lot of planning went into it before we actually launched. Something that we did in the early stages of the launch was look at something called a pre-mortem planning. So this was essentially figuring out how things might or could possibly fail before they did. So we looked at a bunch of different ideas. It came to us from meeting with partners all across the state of Pennsylvania, people who are invested in planting trees in Pennsylvania. So our core goal for the Keystone 10 Million Trees Partnership is planting 10 million trees across Pennsylvania by 2025. And many of those goals are very specifically aligned with the Chesapeake Bay Watershed implementation plan. So that is making sure that trees are going into the right places with the right tree to ensure that we have improved water quality in the Chesapeake Bay. But as you'll notice further on in the programming, we do work outside of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, which is part of the reason why I'm talking with you today. And that's to talk about the different initiatives that we do outside of the Chesapeake Bay watershed and why that's important. But going back to the beginning, we took all of those ideas. There were post-it notes all over the office. This is actually before I came on, and many of my peers accumulated them to see what were the best ideas and what was the resounding message coming through again and again. And two things really came through in that planning. The first is increased supply, which you'll notice on this slide, and increased demand. So looking at this almost as a business model. So seeing that you needed to increase the supply of native trees being available in Pennsylvania, but then you also need to increase the demand for those native trees in Pennsylvania. So making sure that you can have the trees available and that there's homes for them, and not just homes anywhere, but in the right places. So part of this pre-mortem planning also included weighting our value system. So when I came on, actually after launch, is when we did this really deep dive strategic planning. So we'd done the launch, we had great success planting over 30,000 trees that first spring, and I believe another approximately 10,000 that first fall. And then I came on board and we really sat down and looked at the long-term planning. So what was going to happen between 2018 and 2025 to help us meet those goals and to build a solid partnership. So we created a set of values. So when we looked at our values of what we needed incorporated, these were the things, again, that were those resounding themes. Influencing leaders, behavior change. So seeing the need for getting people excited about native trees. Multiplier effect. What could we do that would have a ricochet effect out to all the other things that we wanted to achieve and help us get there faster? Economic benefits, looking at the economic viability and the increases, the economic value to what these trees bring to our local economy. Community benefits. How does this impact a community? Does it bring something good to them? Does it increase their quality of life? Environmental benefits. You can see it's further down the row. Doesn't mean it's any less important. These are all weighted out of 10 when we looked through all the different areas of increasing demand and increasing supply. So environmental benefits obviously is one of the largest things that we look at in the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. But all of these others factor into it to help achieve success. Building trust. Thus is incredibly important and really is the keystone to us surviving and thriving between now and 2025. Political viability. This is actually where many of you come in handy, and I'll talk more about that later. But when we talk about political viability, it's making sure that our local leaders, that our state leaders, that our federal leaders are on board with us. Resources required. I have this note as backwards, and I should have taken that part out. But what we wanted to know is how little or how much money was something going to cost. Obviously, working as a nonprofit, us using our resources wisely and using our funding resources wisely is very important. So if we can use less dollars to achieve something greater, that's what we'll do. So that's why less dollars would equal a higher score, which is why that's backwards. Keystone task. So this is one of those things that really comes into the heart of the partnership, making sure that this Keystone task is something that's a core value to the program. And how does it all fit in? So over a period of about 6 to 7 weeks, as we were holed up in a conference room looking at all these things and weighing all these things and taking those 200 plus ideas and figuring out whether they were appropriate for increased supply or increased demand, and then taking those and weighing every single idea down all of these different criteria, helped us come up with our strategic plan to 10 million trees. And this is the framework that I'm going to go over with you today. So you can see our core strategies are planting 6 million trees through direct CBF restoration and partnership investments. So this could be us sending our CBF Pennsylvania restoration staff. This could be us referring landowners out to our partners and providing them with trees and supplies. This could also be us helping to fund other tree plantings or subsidize their costs in a different way. The other would be the stimulated planting of 4 million trees through new financing programs and WIP and blueprint accountability. If you're not familiar, the Chesapeake Bay Watershed has just finalized their Phase 3 Watershed Implementation Plan, and the blueprint is the guidebook for how we get close to saving the bay, how we achieve success in saving the bay. So these are the things that we really look at, and we're constantly looking at innovative ways to get funding out to our partners and landowners to achieve this work. You can see launching an interface e-commerce platform to connect landowners and industry. This is something we still want to achieve with the industry. So bringing together those native plant suppliers, the people who are contractors working in this work every day, day in and day out, and how we can better connect them to the public to increase that demand. And then lastly, deploying that advocacy campaign, growing volunteers, increasing the number of landowners and public officials to advocate for that clean nation. Those are all really important things. The demand for trees is really important. So making sure that we have places to plant trees. As many of you know, we have a lot of public space and a lot of private land. So a lot of our goals are really aligned again to that blueprint goal. So we're planting trees along streams. We're planting trees in urban and stormwater impact areas. We're planting trees on abandoned mine lands. All these areas that greatly impact the nutrients and sediment load that are going into the bay. So increasing the demand for trees means making people aware of our program and our partners program, building those partner relationships so that we have touch points all across the Commonwealth, and making sure that financial incentives are available, especially to those landowners who are giving up essentially their land for us to plant trees. So we do that for a variety of ways. The first is something that we're actively working on now, which is communicating and having conversations with the health sector. So looking at that direct connection between public health and health insurance and equality and trees. What is that connection? How is that related to a dollar value of ecosystem services and being able to potentially quantify a dollar value to the impact of planting trees in your community? A second is a tiered buffer incentive program. So you can see over on the left-hand side of your screen, we have been working actively with Chesapeake Conservancy to come up with this informed buffer placement. So it's looking at water path flow analysis to find the best places to plant trees instead of just looking at that traditional 50, 35, 100-foot buffer and looking at where the water is actually going. Our hope is to one day connect that technology to the dollars coming in that are matched with the public health benefits and help them live together to award landowners those funds to plant trees on their properties and potentially take their agricultural product out of production in place of planting trees. The last is collaborative grants. So this is providing trees, shelters, and funds towards projects that we help match. Now, I will say that as far as dollar values going to a grant match, we do only provide those within the Chesapeake Bay Watershed. However, if you are looking for trees and potentially also shelters and stakes to use as a grant match or showing as a cash match in the value of the trees and supplies that we give you, we can definitely talk about doing that with your upcoming projects. Increasing supply is the other large portion of this. So we have been working diligently with native plant suppliers all across Pennsylvania and actually expanding into the mid-Atlantic. After 2008 and the economic decline, many of these native plant nurseries went out of business, unfortunately. So this is a great opportunity for people to be able to look at this as a potential business model for themselves, for their organizations. So we do have a grower supply work group where we work with them to increase the supply of native trees. We partner with those growers, with tree suppliers, and we look at building corporate and nonprofit advocates to help fund those relationships and help us to be able to purchase them. So something that we did for the first time this year is put out a request for proposal for forward contracting. So this is where we are prepaying for the trees to have them grown specifically to our request and have them available to give out in 2022. So next year we'll have 210,000 trees available just through a regular traditional request for proposal using existing stock. But then the year after, 500,000 trees will be available from us in 2022 that we will have grown with our partners. So our partners are growing them, and we are dictating the standards and the types of trees and the seeds and where they're coming from. And so those have recently been awarded, and we're working on the final contracts for them now. So this is a constant learning process as we learn about the businesses, as we try to better understand their needs and what they need from us and what we can provide to them. Lastly, for this kind of three-part thing of how we bring increased demand and increased supply together to meet at this interface. So this is something we dream of seeing further down the line. So as we're coming to an end of this program in 2025, we would love to see something in line, and I put the Bower and Branch model up here because it shows a really good example of a web-based, internet-based website where people can go, they can learn about the tree, they can even do kind of like a personality test to match themselves to just the right tree. So we want to work with the growers and suppliers to help them see the importance of bringing something to people's phones, to their tablets, to their computers that they can easily click and shop, because we all know that, you know, going down to your local garden center, they may not have the native tree supplies that we want to see out there. They might not have the growing practices that we need to see for the biodiversity and the habitat and wildlife benefit that we need to see as part of our work. So our goal is moving and having our 10milliontrees.org website continually build to offer more systems and services to landowners and to partners. So we're currently heading into that phase 2 section right now. So currently as a partner, you can request your trees every January for spring and every July for fall. And we have that all fairly automated. It's being connected to the inventory we have for trees available. There's still some back and forth being worked out, but we're trying to make it as user-friendly as possible. And then in the current phase that's being actually developed right now, it'll be more landowner engagement. So different tools that landowners can really access to get connected with us, but also with our 145 different partners. And phase 3 is what we envision happening with the industry. So the industry taking something on like maybe the Amazon model of bringing native trees to landowners, easy access, helping them get these tools and native trees available quickly, easily, and affordably. So how do you become a partner? So if you are interested in partnering with us, we do have a partner application. We have an operating guideline that our work group has created, our advisory work group has created, which is mostly a set of goals and achievements that we are going to work with collectively. So as a partner, you can get free trees for your restoration projects. For the next few years, you can also get shelters and stakes. I will say that that will start to decrease in later years outside of the Chesapeake watershed, especially depending on our funding sources. But free trees are always available. We can help you with volunteer recruitment, and we have tools on our website to do that. We have access to Practice Keeper and GIS tree planting reports. So the Practice Keeper part has changed a little bit. We're actually actively working with the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and we're potentially looking at field docs as a way for you to track your tree planting progress and then have that count towards your grant goals and state progress. So we can talk more about that in a further training after you become a partner. Other things we're working on right now is actually connecting our GIS tree tracker map with real-time NOAA weather and flooding alerts. So we hope to one day be able to offer a service where you could get a text message on your phone to say, this property that you planted has a flash flood alert in the next hour, or potentially for it to go to a landowner and they could get it and say, this farm field where trees were recently planted is going to have a flash flood or tornadoes coming through. And we look at that reminder as something for them to remember, oh yeah, I have that buffer out there. And if I get a flood, I might have to replace trees. I might have to restand some of those tree shelters. So how can we make this automated and more friendly for these landowners to take on these projects? In addition, we have partner marketing, swag, materials support, so help with postcards and brochures and various things that we can get out for you guys to share with landowners. And then, of course, our meetings and our events and our workshops that we have typically between quarterly and biannually. So acting together, this is the partnership. This is creating the legacy of Keystone 10 Million Trees Partnership. So my dream would be to see us get to 2025 and have us hit that 10 million tree mark and have the Keystone Trees Partnership live on beyond 2025. So have it be a legacy that people could drive past a tree planting area and see a sign for the Keystone 10 Million Trees Partnerships and know that, let's say 20 years from now, when those trees are really maturing and growing out, their foliage is providing great shade for their landowners, that people can see that work and remember the legacy program of this. The other part of the partnership is an advocacy campaign that I'll talk about in just a little bit, which really incorporates you, and the DOC Award. So the DOC Award nomination form is open to partners to be able to nominate a different partner themselves or a partner volunteer for work that they are doing in underserved communities. And that will be awarded this October 30th, along with a webinar we are doing in conjunction with the Pennsylvania Forestry Association. We're pretty excited about that. So advocacy. So this is promoting the partnership within your messaging. So when you become a partner, we can provide tools and ways for you to get the word out about the work that you're doing with us and the work that you're doing alone. I always use Smokey Bear as an example because I think of programs that have longevity. So Smokey Bear has been around since the early 50s, I think even late 40s, and you can still see Smokey the Bear's image. And remember, only you can prevent forest fires. So think about that kind of messaging that we can make with Keystone 10 Million Trees Partnership to have that legacy last on far beyond maybe even us being alive. So that advocacy is promoting the value of trees, building that trust and integrity in the brand of the Keystone 10 Million Trees Partnership. It helps us increase partners, landowners, volunteers. And here's where you really come in. So partners outside the Chesapeake Bay Watershed are typically living in places like Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Erie, and we look at those places as core population centers and also core advocacy centers. So much of our legislative power lives in those areas, and we want to be able to use those opportunities outside the Chesapeake Bay Watershed to make sure that we're inviting local officials, state officials, federal officials, advocates for clean water to your tree plantings, post-COVID of course, and have them come out and see the work that you are doing out in the field to understand the value of a tree to clean water legislation and advocacy. So that is something very specific that we ask to our partners outside the watershed. And then it's keeping the Keystone Tree Partnership alive beyond that 2025 date. And we do that through messaging, which we're really ramping up. We do that through taking people out in the water into the bay and for engaging volunteers and making them some type of master planter to really get engaged and find those plant sites. We have work groups that help us get everything done. So we have a partner advisory work group, we have a messaging work group, a planting work group that lives inside of the DCNR Riparian Forest Buffer Advisory Committee. We also have a grower supply work group, and soon we'll have a DOC award nomination group. Future work groups we have coming would be finance and science. And so you'll see, just some of the time in this picture, you'll notice some people meeting. This was actually an early brainstorming session about how to make the Keystone 10 Million Trees Partnership work. But there's a reason we call them work groups and not committees. And that's because it's not just a decision-making group. It is a work group. You are there to work together, to be partners with one another, to see this success together. So what's happening in Eastern Pennsylvania around the Schuylkill area? So we have partnered with Stroud Water Research Center, and we are funding research that they are doing on their stone mulch application. And you'll notice a picture of it here. And so this is putting, I think it's modified to a stone mulch around tree shelters with stakes and potential netting. So trying to find the best applications for herbicide or non-herbicide, or using Tubex versus Plantra, or white oak stake versus treated stake, or fiberglass stake. There's so many options. So we're funding this research towards this with Stroud Water. We'll be evaluating the results. We'll even be offering field trips out to look at this research in the near future, post-COVID-19 again. And really getting to see what is the best cost value, economic value, and environmental value to these products, because we know we need them, especially since we're mostly providing bare root and small containerized trees. So you can see all the different partners we work with in the eastern part of Pennsylvania. Everyone works at a different capacity. So some are doing one tree planting a year. They might order 50 to 100 trees from us. Some are ordering 4,000 to 5,000 trees from us in a season. So it really just depends on what your group is interested and able to do, what kind of outreach and access you have and interest that you have. So we are willing to work with partners at any capacity. But you always want to think about the Keystone 10 Million Tree Partnership as a wholesaler. So we're not there for your 5 trees here and there. We're there for the larger scale trees and the larger scale projects. So I wanted to end this looking at the tips that we've learned along the way. And this is, I'm sure, what we'll talk about more in our Q&A following this presentation. I did talk about the pre-mortem planning. So again, this is determining what may fail before it launches. This was so important. It was the first time I had ever done this in any capacity. It certainly stretched my mind. It stretched my decision-making power, but it was so much better than a pro or con list. I don't know how many times I've taken a list and I've written out pro and con and tried to decide from that how to make a decision. And it's never that simple as a pro and con list. So the pre-mortem planning really helps you take that set of values that you have, your organization has, your funders have, your partners have, bring them together to be able to look at that value system and how you establish that in a program. And I can definitely provide you some books to read, some resources that we found really helpful, not only in pre-mortem planning, but also in group think and decision making, and really being able to work as a team and not just bow to one another as we, worried about saying the right thing or doing the right thing. I highly recommend this. Even in the first few months that I started this position, we were able to implement certain practices from this planning because things had already failed. So don't think of fail as a failure. Think of it, of course, as an opportunity. And I know you've probably heard that a million times. But this process truly allows you to be able to look at that planning, take that strategy and go, okay, A didn't work out, but now I have B, C, D, E. I might even have F planned because we've thought so far ahead about all the different opportunities and the things that might happen to cause this to not be successful. The other thing I really recommend, sorry, that's my dog, is investing time and preparation. So many times we get, really focused on, okay, we got to launch this. The time is now. It's right for the opportunity. And I myself am the biggest committer of that. I want to rush. I get so excited. I feel like you have to do it now while the energy is there. But I encourage you, invest the time and preparation, even if it means that you don't launch at that best time. That best time may not even exist. It may look like it, may feel like it. But if you do not have the right backbone organization, if you don't have the right resources and funding lined up, if you don't have partners on board, it means that best time isn't going to be a best time because it will not be successful. I'm not saying it's not possible to be successful, but when you invest that time and prepare, even if it means that you don't start on the time that you really want, it will be so worth it in the long term. Partner organizations are going to be the story of your success. So these are the people and the organizations and the leaders who have stepped up, who are excited about this, who want to invest time, energy, money, resources, all of these things. Put them to work. Help them help you with the launch, with organizing, with recruiting. Make sure that they are invested in this program with you, that you are in agreement at the objectives that you want to achieve together. Secure large fundraising commitments prior to launch and ensure you have long-term financial backing. So this is making sure that you have the funding necessary to achieve those goals. So if you've built that up, you've built that backbone organization, similar to a collective impact model is what we're talking about. And again, I can send resources for that as well. Making sure that you have that fundraising commitment up front so that when you launch, you know that you have a certain number of months or years, depending on the length of your program, to see you to success. If you're unable to get that, it might be an indication that maybe this isn't going to be working, or maybe you aren't meant to be the backbone organization. So maybe it's time to look at another partner. Is there a larger partner or a more established partner that can help you launch something amazing and bring in those financial dollars, bring in those partners, help with that time investment, help with that planning? So don't think about you carrying the burden of a project, carrying the excitement and the longevity of a project. Think about what partners can bring to you, what you can bring to partners. It has to be a shared relationship. There's so many things that I have learned through this process. It has been phenomenal and amazing. And we launched in April 2018. Now we're just about in, actually by the time you all see this, we're in September 2020. And we're 2.5 years into this goal of a 7-year program ending in 2025. But we've built it in a way that will ensure that hopefully it doesn't end in 2025. Hopefully we've met our goals in 2025 and that we've established legacy programs. But what's great is even if we fail along the way, through this planning process, we've come up with tools and tricks and different avenues to be able to achieve success in 2025 in one way, shape, or form. So think about all of these things as you're planning. I look forward to your questions. I look forward to getting you my contact information and seeing how we can work together, not only as a partner in the Keystone 10 Million Trees Partnership, but also how you can launch tree initiatives in your area or programs in your area. Thanks for your time.